The relationship between Asuka and Shinji is one of the most poignant and one of the most painful, not just in Evangelion, but in anime as a whole. Not because they're great for each other, not because they're terrible for each other, but because they're both at the same time. In a imperfect, fallen, ordinary world, they have the potential to help each other heal and make each other's lives better and clearer. But because they are broken and because they are deeply consumed by their own worst impulses, their own anxiety, their own existential confusion, their own deep feelings of inadequacy that cause them to retreat into themselves and into these defensive impulses, they are unwilling and unable to really help each other in the way that they are able to. They're unable to really understand each other and to understand how much they could genuinely help each other. Asuka is a difficult character because she always pushes people away, even though she deeply desires, on some level, their help and their care. That is what makes her frustrating, and that is what makes her fascinating as a person. She is someone who has never had support growing up. Her mother, as we see, committed suicide, leaving Asuka desperate to grow up. And her idea of growing up is complete independence, completely severing her own person from everyone else. But that idea of independence is a deeply unhealthy and extreme one, and it is based on this desire to not be hurt, to not suffer as she has suffered in the past, to not be vulnerable, to not be a child. Her father remarried, and that further caused a disruption to Asuka's normative sense of healthy human relationships. She is in some ways quite cynical and quite dour about love and passion and commitment, shaped by her negative experiences. And yet at the same time, she has this desire for that connection, even if she is terrible at expressing it because of her own defensiveness and her own deep insecurity. There is nothing that could benefit Asuka more than being vulnerable and allowing herself to connect with others. And yet, because of what she has suffered, because of her psychological malaise and instability, that is exactly what she cannot do. She usually tries to assume this posture of what she thinks being an adult is like, which is aggressive, which is certainty above all else, which is this attempt to embrace sexuality, often in ways that are rather uncomfortable, because Asuka does not fully come to these feelings organically. She tries to act like this confident, mature, non-childish adult, and she absolutely despises being reminded that she is a child and that she is vulnerable. Her attempted sexual advances on Kaji at the end of the show and his subsequent awkwardness and rejection of her for, well, being a child causes her this greater sense of unease. She wants support. She wants a sense of care and concern and warmth in her life. And yet, she cannot find that, and it is in a certain way her fault. She can't really expect to find real connections and real love and tenderness if the possibility of those things in her life causes her to react with defensiveness, aggression, and bitterness, especially towards Shinji. And yet this is inevitably the result of her own psychological dread and unease, her desperate desire to be thought of as this confident, mature, assertive person. Her attempts to play act that part are ultimately a shell that prevents her from doing the healing and the connection that she needs in order to get a bit closer to becoming that person. Shinji has similar problems and anxieties. He deeply feels inadequate. He deeply feels that he has no idea of who he is. His sense of self-worth is deeply fragile, much more openly than Asuka's. And he has difficulty reaching out and connecting with people because of his lack of belief in his own worth, in his own quality as a human being. He faces this archetypal existentialist dilemma that Zart talks about very well in Being in Nothingness. The idea that we all have these projections about who we are and who we think of ourselves. And those projections are inevitably frail and incomplete. Because our identity does not simply exist within our own individual subjectivities, it exists and is built in the world, and that means it exists in our interactions with others. There is no us aside from our interactions with others, and that means our very our very sense of the self is inevitably in a sense of turmoil. If others do not see us as we want to be seen, that fundamentally causes this deep dread and anxiety regarding our fundamental self-image and self-concept. And yet, at the same time, the answer to that dilemma is not to retreat from the world into this position of solipsism, to this position of completely severing connections with others and retreating into one's own mind, where there is no difference, where there is no struggle to connect with other perspectives and bear the judgment of others. One has to find a way to exert one's own being in the world while acknowledging that that is inevitably mediated by connections with other people. A lot of these ideas are very complicated, but they're exemplified very well in the final few episodes of Evangelion. And in fact, when I started reading a lot of existentialist philosophy, Sartre, and the like, I had a bit of an easier time with it than I otherwise would have, simply because I already had a lot of this strong basis in these ideas and relatively sophisticated forms of these ideas by encountering them in work like Evangelion. Shinji ultimately has to understand that a world with no one in it is a world of absolute freedom, but that freedom is hollow and empty. It's a freedom that means nothing. It's not a freedom to do anything. He ultimately needs to understand that he needs to make choices for himself and accept that doing so might evoke the judgment of other people and might cause disruption and anxiety and to himself and others, and yet nonetheless that is essential, that he does choose, that he makes choices about how to act and how to be in the world. And this is something he has a hard time in. There's that constant joke about, get in the robot, Shinji! But honestly, his inability to do that, or his inability to do much of anything decisive and anything that functions as an expression of a pure, clear sense of self-concept, comes from that deep sense of anxiety regarding his lack of a solid self-concept. And that very much affects his relationship with Asuka. Asuka reacts quite spikily towards Shinji, and Shinji takes this very harshly. And it ultimately leads Shinji into this deep unease about himself that prevents him from connecting with Asuka in an honest way. Not as an object or an ideal, but as a real person that he can mean something to, that he can help. And in supporting her, that can reify and strengthen his basic sense of self-concept, his basic sense of who he is. And all of this really comes to a head in the famous kissing scene, one of my favorite scenes in this show, and a scene that I appreciate more and more the more often I watch this show. The first time I saw the show, I thought it was a fun scene. Thought it was quite wry and even a little poignant. It's not that I was completely immune to the complexities of it, but I did not really fully grasp those complexities until later. When I was watching the show again and again, this is the perfect emblematization of their relationship. What happens on a basic factual level is that Asuka, as she often is feeling desperate, lonely, needing connection. Her basic sense of self is unraveling, and being Asuka, she can't express that in an open and honest way. So she goes to Shinji and wants him to kiss her. But she can't just say that and admit that she likes him and wants that. She says, oh, she's doing it because she's bored, and it's just, it's a thing to do. And she approaches it in her Asuka passive-aggressive way. Shinji does not know how to react, and he does not want to provoke her, does not want her to think ill of him, so he ultimately does nothing. He is very filled with doubt and his own psychological unease, and so he just participates without participating. Paralyzed and deeply self-conscious, and eventually, after a long time, too long, Asuka stops kissing him and runs off. And makes up an excuse for how she reacted the way she did. Shinji has no idea what to make of this. He feels inadequate, but he doesn't know what to do. And indeed, his lack of action is ultimately what causes their continued inability to connect. If Shinji had been able to just really embrace her, really express love and passion and affection for her, express a sense of warmth and support, express that he was someone she could rely on for help and warmth and loving connection, that would have been great for Asuka and for him. But of course, that's not what happens. And of course that's not what happens. Shinji has no idea that she wants that. And why would he? Asuka can't express that. She is unable to express that. She can only express her deep affection and need for love, for warmth, for someone to touch her and hold her and tell her that everything is going to be alright and really give her the warmth and the reassurance that she needs. She can't ask for that. She is too broken as a person. Her sense of self-concept is too severed, and Shinji is so consumed with his own malaise and his own anxiety that he has no idea that this is what she wants. And he is too contained within his own isolation and his own self-loathing to really reach out. So these are two people who really are, in a basic level, good for each other, or have the capacity to be good for each other. Asuka needs a degree of support and connection and love and appreciation. And that's what she really wants. And Shinji wants to feel like a meaningful, decisive person that other people can rely on. These two people could fit together quite well, but they can't, because they can't ask for what they want and what they need, because they're too consumed by their own psychological inadequacies and their own deep anxiety. And they're unable to even understand or even start to understand each other. Certainly unable to really connect with each other on the way they need to, the way that would be beneficial for them. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can. And you want to see more videos like this one before anyone else. Take care, everyone. Adios, comrades.